Hello everyone, and welcome to our 2020 Endeavour Summit non-profit panel. Let me begin by first thanking you all for being a part of our panel. I'll be your host for today. My name is Steph Blue, and I'm the Digital Marketing Coordinator here at the Knoxville Chamber. Now, I know all your names already, and I'm super grateful to be moderating today's discussion. We're so glad that you could all be here. So first of all, could we start with Tanika and go to Matt, and everyone introduce themselves and their organization, or the organization that you're affiliated with?
My name is Tanika Harper. I'm here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I represent Shora Foundation.
And my name is Matt Ryerson, and I am part of the United Way of Greater Knoxville team.
Hi, I'm Eliza Punzel Randall, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO for YWCA Knoxville in the Tennessee Valley.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, we'll jump right into our first question. And we can start with you, Tanika, if that's okay. And then we could just go in the order that we just kind of introduced ourselves. So first question, in this day and age, a lot of young people are wanting to get involved in numerous ways to help their communities. So what are some of the practical ways that we can get involved and help beyond the traditional ask of monetary and volunteer donations?
Absolutely. So that is a great question, especially where we are right now in the middle of a pandemic. Some people just really don't have the funds to give. But one of the ways that people can kind of get involved is to sit on boards, nonprofit boards. Especially if you don't have the time weekly to even volunteer. I know the question was like, if you don't really have the time to volunteer and you don't really have the money, what's one way you can get plugged in? And I think definitely looking to get involved to sitting on nonprofit boards or committees, such as a program committee or a fundraising committee, because typically these committees or board meetings don't typically take too much of your time in terms of volunteership. So it is still a volunteer role, but obviously less hours are committed to those types of roles.
Okay, can I just ask the question off of that too? So how would you get onto those boards? What would be the steps that you would take?
You know, I would really, Alliance for Better Nonprofits, which is a great resource in our community for not only nonprofits, but people seeking to be plugged into a nonprofit. You can go there and you can research different organizations in town that's looking for board members or looking for committee members. And I would just say too, like, you know, research what's in your community, like whatever community you're in, wherever you are, look at, you know, some of the organizations that are grassroots in your community, see if they line up or match up with your life's goals or life agenda or something that you feel connected to, and just walk in the door. I mean, I've had people just walk in the door and simply just say, hey, I'd love to volunteer. Where do you need help? And so walking in the door is always an option. If you feel like there are not really any grassroots or, you know, nonprofit organizations in your community that you know of, then you could always go through Alliance for Better Nonprofits to get more clarity.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo what Tanika said. I think getting engaged, getting involved, and just going out and talking to those organizations out there. And to kind of echo what she said, I think the key to all that is passion. And if you're feeling passionate about something, there's an issue that you feel personally strikes a chord or you are wrestling with, those are the type of organizations that you want to get engaged with. The second part of that, I think, for me, is to get educated on that particular issue and the organizations that serve in that arena. And you know, sometimes it seems pretty simple, but most of our community ills, whatever those issues are, have a certain level of complexity to them. And so doing your own research, being read up on them, and then as Tanika said, if there is anything that all of us love to talk about, it's the work that we do. If somebody comes by the office and says, hey, I'd love to chat with you about housing and the homeless or whatever the issue is, you're not going to be lost to find a lot of nonprofit leaders, a lot of grassroots organizations, community leaders that are anxious to have that conversation, because the more allies we can build in any of these issues, the more successful we can be in overcoming them. So I'd echo what Tanika said, is get out there, get engaged, get involved. And with the technology aspects, even though it's not the same as face-to-face, it does open the door, and it is convenient to make sure that you do get connected, and you set up these phone calls, set up these conversations, and get tied in. And I think through that process, you will find a fit, because I believe there's a fit for everybody. In fact, there's probably multiple fits for everybody. And once you find that fit, and once you find your place and you find your home as far as your servant mentality, you're going to find that you're going to have a significant impact.
Great, thank you.
So in terms of what I could add, if there's anything I can add, Tanika and Matt covered it very well. So I know, when you are looking and you have no idea how to start, Tanika mentioned Alliance for Better Nonprofits. They're a good place that if you're just looking even for names of organizations, United Way is a good place to start for looking who the United Way partners are, and who they have graciously funded over time. And know that if you are into, say you're into kids and you're into animals, being able to narrow down, okay, now I've got 5 off of this. Now I'm going to do some self-exploration, check out their social media. And then you can really start to see, okay, where might an organization have room for someone like me? If I just want to do some hands-on, I may not be the board member or committee member type, but I want to go work with the animals directly, or I want to go to a children's hospital and do some direct work with actual staff members and with the babies over there. There's so much at our fingertips, especially, you can Google everything. But I'll say for YWCA, so our mission is, I feel like it's one that hopefully anybody could latch on to. It's eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And even in this virtual time, we encourage people. We may not be able to have as much interaction with our clients and the people we serve, but there's definitely some things in terms of advocacy that we encourage them to do. For example, this month, in the month of October, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we'd love for you to go on our page to take a pledge to stand against domestic violence. And we'll do that to take a stand against racism. So even what might seem like a small step, that's where a lot of people's advocacy work begins. Is taking some of those small pledges that you might come across. So I think there's a numerous ways, and we've all touched on them, of ways to get involved with organizations in the community.
Thank you. That was, wow. You've informed me a lot. So that's great. Okay, awesome. We'll go on to question number 2. In our current climate, there are a number of groups that need assistance, and a number of groups that young people want to help. What are the easiest ways to narrow down our impact and choose who and how to help those communities that we want to help? So we'll start with you, Tanika, if that's okay.
That's fine. I definitely think that going back to what was said previously is that you really have to narrow down what it is your heart's desire is. What are you passionate about? Because the reality of it is there are a lot of great things that's going on in Knoxville, right? But I'm not called and I'm not passionate about all the great things. And so it's like, if your thing is youth, then get connected to youth programming. And maybe if it's not directly sitting down tutoring a kid, maybe it's, giving $5 a month, or like I said, sitting on a board, or finding books, or, or if your passion is homelessness, get involved with an organization that is geared towards homelessness. So with all the great opportunities that are going on, I would just say to really dig deep within yourself, to really just figure out what it is you're passionate about, and really seek out organizations who kind of have the same interest as you do.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Tanika, she's right on point there. It's all about passion. It's about your heart. So I won't just duplicate what she's saying. I'll go a slightly different route. One of the things that I think is sometimes underevaluated is our return on investment. Now that sounds like a financial term, and it obviously is, but I think it's applicable in the sense that so often if we're looking at our retirement fund or if we're looking at some personal investment, what we're looking on, even if it's something that I'm doing with my family, what I'm looking at, if I'm going to put 10 bucks into something, my hope is that I'm going to get 12 bucks back. Well, in the nonprofit world, in the social service world, what we're looking for is a social return. So if we're investing time, if we're investing money, whatever we're personally investing into a cause, the hope is that we're seeing some return socially. And that becomes a little more challenging to evaluate because it isn't as simple as dollars and cents. I put 10 bucks in, I got 12 bucks back. It's a bit more complicated, but going back to Tanika's comment, you can evaluate that from the sense of the heart, right? And I think we can do a little bit more research and have more discussion about what that looks like. And just a really quick example. We often look at things big, broad, and I'm going to do a generalization here, but there are really two areas of service that we do, and they usually relate to one of these two areas. One, there's a crisis. There's a tornado, there's a mudslide, there is a hurricane, there's all sorts of disasters. And the response, the appropriate response, if there's a house fire in the neighborhood, is to provide what we call relief work, which is immediate basic needs direction. You want to respond with those basic needs so that people are okay and healthy. On the other side, and again, this is an oversimplification, but on the other side, you have a chronic problem, a chronic challenge. And the approach we want to take there is more appropriately in the development world. Now, development takes time, it takes energy, it takes the success rate's lower. There are greater challenges there, but usually the outcomes are better. What we don't want to do is we don't want to cross over. And what I mean by that is you don't want to take a chronic problem and use a relief approach where you're just trying to, for example, give somebody out of poverty. What we know, the research tells us that there is a much stronger development process required for people to get those gains. So and that's a really quick overview, but what I would challenge people to do is A, as Tanika said, follow your heart first and foremost. And then secondly, really look at what the return on that investment is. And so when you evaluate a program or an organization, is it worth my time? Because is that organization or that grassroots community-led organization, is it having the impact that I would like to see? And if not, then you might want to take your passion and look at a different organization. If it is, then what I find is that most people don't just invest, they double down their investment. They're giving their time, their money, their energy, whatever they can personally contribute to the cause because it's more meaningful and it's getting that social return we all desire.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Matt touches on, that's a great way to look at that, the crisis versus the chronic. And I'll use YWCA as an example of how we've been asked to respond to it. We have, I like to say that what we do, it kind of falls into three buckets. We're in transitional housing. We're in victim advocacy for domestic violence victims. And then we serve youth. And so all of those have presented during COVID, the time of COVID, ways for us to uniquely respond to that. When funders ask, what do you need? How can we help? And funders have realized early on, I'd say, in April and May, the typical ways that we gave, we're going to have to change course and respond to how to help keep these organizations in business. Because everybody was affected, donors, clients, the providers, everybody. And so for us, obviously, let's take homelessness, that's a chronic problem. I think we'd all love to say, we'd love to be put out of business because the issue that we're trying to address was solved. But the reality is that we hope we are going to be here for, who knows how long. I would say we've been here since 1899. We'll be here for another 100 and some odd years. But when COVID hit, our clients, the way that they were affected, it's hard for us as just citizens operating in our normal lives. But imagine someone who's hit the lowest point of their life, no income, no family to support. They may have an addiction issue. They may have a mental health crisis. And now what? Now they if they were working in food services, they've lost their job. So that's the story that we're able to tell a funder or someone who may have some extra money at the end of the month to say, how can I make I only have $50 to help you. Is this going to make a difference? And we can say, absolutely, because this person here, they're looking at what could really, $50 can go a long way in this person's life to pay off a rent assistance, to KUB assistance, to pay off a mortgage, to pay off, you name it. So I feel like right now, especially, the need is great. Well, the need was great before, but the need is even greater now. So I know that all three of us could probably have tips for how people can get involved. But one thing we haven't mentioned yet is 211. 211 is a great place to go as a resource if you're looking for what is it that people need. Matt, what's that website address, the website address for 211?
211counts.org.
211counts.org. And so that's another way to narrow down your interests. So if you have an interest, you're able to it'll pull up organizations that are serving a particular need. And that's another way to get to know organizations that may be mirroring a cause that you want to support.
Eliza, real quick, if I can jump in here, Steph, my apologies, but I think Eliza's got this incredible program. They do incredible work. And just to give you an example, and this is one of these where I really always think it's important for people to recognize the investment in the requirement. They are a great model of development program, and the women in your program stay a while. And I think sometimes they're just like, hey, we can turn this around in a week. But your program, maybe you could share the average length or the length of time that often they stay with you at the YW.
Sure. In our Keys of Hope program, we have 58 units where single women they can stay with us, and they can stay with us for up to 2 years. The sweet spot in terms of the average stay of how long someone's with us is usually about 12 to 14 months of when they're able to pay off fines. They're able to, because we're all about the path to self-sufficiency. And that's really what someone's going to need in order to get into permanent housing and stay there. So it takes, we're investing in the people we serve. And so we always welcome when somebody else is willing to do so as well.
And Steph, the reason I wanted her to highlight that is because I think that's such a great example, the difference between a hurricane on the coast, on the Gulf Coast, where people go down and hand out bottles of water, which is important and vital. That's a crisis relief effort that's key, but it's very different when you're dealing with a chronic problem that's complex in nature and ultimately takes time and energy. It's important that when people do get engaged, they understand those differences, because if not, I think for those of you out there, it can become a point of frustration that you get in, you're going to volunteer at the YW, and you see a woman come in and out for a year, and you're like, what are we doing? Unless you have that understanding, which is why that research of the work is so key, to understand that investment is different than maybe another approach for another issue. Neither is wrong. We just have to, apply the appropriate reaction to those issues to have the best outcomes.
Great. Thank you guys so much for that. We're going to change it up a little bit. I want to start with Eliza first, if that's okay for this question. What is the biggest issue you see coming out of the pandemic for your nonprofit business, and what can local youth do to help?
Well, I'll say that we are seeing across the board for all of our clients, there is a mental health component across the board in terms, and whether that is, say, maybe a heavy trauma that someone is experiencing, and then you overlay the stresses that COVID is bringing, and whether that is monetary or experiencing loss of loved ones and not being able to, as all of us may have experienced, some of us have experienced, being able to have any closure with something like that. I think everyone's experiencing a level of stress. So whether you're staying with us or whether you're a middle schooler from Vine, a high schooler from Austin East, or their families, whether you're a domestic violence victim, that mental health piece, I feel like there will be a need for that. So our community partners, we work with over 100 of them. We're constantly trying to figure out our staff, our employees, of who can we be prepared in the next 6 to 9 months, 12 months, once once the people we serve may leave our program. We know they're going to need additional services beyond this. How can we go ahead and link them up? So in terms of how youth can be aware, I feel, this is going to sound very personal or organic. I think we need to check on each other more than we, just assuming, oh, you've got, you have 4 walls around you, you have a job. It looks like from the outsider on social, your life is great. I feel like now is the time to be checking in on each other, because that's what could easily be taken for granted in all this virtual, this whole virtual world that we're living in. Is it's easy for me to get on this panel and say, I'm doing great. When I can be honest and say, I am not the best remote learning teacher. And I'm not, and so, I think about how my 8-year-old is going to come out of all of this. So I think in terms of what one can do very personally is to check on individuals in your network and circle that you may not otherwise do, because you never know, they might be someone that any of us could eventually serve in some way. So.
Thank you. Matt, you can go ahead.
I'm in the middle again. All right. So I think Eliza hit it really well, connectivity. And I think that is best done, maybe not through an organization, but as Eliza suggested, in the grassroots, or you got neighbors, check on them. You got friends, check on them. Right now, we know that violent crime in 2020 and drug overdoses, mental health evaluations, they're all almost double what they were at this similar time last year. And that just, I think, screams to the environment that we're in, that this is difficult for all of us. And so this isolation and remote spirit is something that we need to overcome. Even something as simple as a text or a phone call can be wonderful. And of course we want to be safe, but to be able to go next door and just tap on the door and say, you don't have to come out, I just want to chat with you through the door, visit, that sort of thing. It's all good. I think that's important. And then the second part that is really interesting. So I'm 49 years old. So I'm on this generational bubble. I didn't grow up in a technological world. I'm guess what everybody calls a technological immigrant. I'm coming into this world, and the generation younger than me is kind of the technological natives, meaning they're growing up in that. And I think even something as simple as members of my team saying, hey, Matt, this Zoom stuff's pretty real, you should try using it. And I'm like, I can't figure this out. For those people to have patience with people like me that are still learning and still grasping this new technology, because I don't think the Zoom culture that we're experiencing now is temporary during COVID. I think we're going to see a pretty significant shift in the work world, not just nonprofit, but the work world, that there is going to be hey, we can be productive and work from home. We can be productive and be distance. It allows for still a productive workforce. And therefore, I think those that are watching this are probably really well positioned to not only take advantage of that from a career-wise, but a service-wise, and servicing a lot of nonprofit organizations that are often a little bit behind the curve as it comes to technology and resources like that. So connectivity and technology are the two top issues to me.
I just wanted to ask a question as a complete side note. For United Way, how have you all personally been affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, so a number of ways. Probably most notably is that a lot of our work is relationship based. So we do a lot of work with nonprofit partners, and historically always face to face. We do a lot of work in fundraising and pulling in donations, almost always face to face. So 2020 has really opened our eyes to say we're going to have to look at alternatives to doing all of that good work and really leverage the resources. So we have really tapped into a number of tools and technology that has helped us achieve those same goals, but it's still a barrier. It's a real challenge. And so, and just personally, Elisa, I'll be a little transparent like you were, is that for an extrovert personally like me, like this is hard, right? I feed off the energy of people. And so I want to be together with my team, and I want to have lunch with like-minded and passionate people and have discussions about how we change the world and how we make Knoxville a better place. And that right now it's, I heard this interesting story that the true chess masters, those that compete and are legendary chess players in the world, that when they train, the most powerful tool in their arsenal is the queen. And when they train or when they practice, they actually will refuse to use the queen, and they'll use all their other resources to make them better. And I feel like maybe 2020 is a cruel twist of fate to challenge all of us to say, okay, we're taking away some of your traditional abilities, maybe some of the things you leaned on the most, and now you're going to have to be creative, you're going to have to be innovative, you're going to have to really lean into these new skills, this new technology, these new avenues. And it's been a real growth opportunity is the way we should frame it, but it's been challenging for sure.
If it's okay, Lisa, can I just divert back to you and ask you personally how your nonprofit also has been affected by the pandemic, if that's okay?
Hey, Steph, Tanika answers first.
Oh yeah, I have no problem with that. Tanika, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Shora Foundation typically, well, right now we have a youth program that we've been operating since 2008. And here we're doing some things around economic development with small business startups in the East Knoxville community. So we've been hit hard as a nonprofit. We're a grassroots nonprofit. So that's always a very different distinction between those organizations who are more national level, who have more of the notoriety and everybody in the nation knows about them, right? So when you talk about being a grassroots organization, you really do have to do a lot of promoting and marketing and meeting and fundraising. And with COVID, it really hurt our program in terms of funding, because a lot of money that was slated to come in was, I get it. Organizations and banks needed to do something like else with those funds in the midst of COVID for more like emergency relief efforts. Because we had to stop programming, then of course we couldn't charge for programming that we weren't, giving out to the community. So it really did hurt us in terms of financial assistance, being able to keep people on staff. And even now we're still just trying to navigate the platform of how do we serve continually in the midst of a pandemic. But we've definitely more than anything have been impacted financially and through our programming registrations.
So Tanika, I know you do so much in this community. I didn't want to go too heavy on you because I'm somewhat a huge fan as well of everything you do on a massive scale for Knoxville. So without going into too much detail or going into as much detail as you want for just my sake, for you on a personal level, being kind of a pioneer for the local community, how has it kind of affected everything that you have been doing?
It's made me go harder. It's made me more passionate. If anybody's on the call, then they know that I am a co-founder of the Women, and we did not start the Women until the pandemic, right? Might have not have been a smart time, but it has really made me more aware of the issues that we already knew existed in under-resourced Black communities, which is the lack of resources there. And essentially, it has just made me dig deeper and go harder to pull community together, not necessarily in the nonprofit realm or asking for the city to do anything. It has made me pull the community together and say, community, we have to do this together. If we want to eat, we got to eat. We got to pull our funds together within the community. If we want our businesses to thrive, we got to pull our money together, and we have to do that together. Because if we depend on government, or if we depend on some type of bailout from a bank, you know, it's never going to change. And so where we obviously need those funds and we expect those funds to come in to help our program run. But at the end of the day, we just can't depend on that for our marginalized communities. We really have to pull together and do it.
Thank you so
Steph,
much.
I'm sorry. Can I piggyback off something Tanika mentioned? Tanika, thank you. I'm glad that you felt it was okay for you to hop in there. You know, I think another piece of what's come out of the pandemic is, and we've touched on it a little bit, is just disparities. Being able to, all of us as individuals, as citizens, recognizing, wow, look at the amazing disparities that exist in almost every sector that you can put your hand on. I feel like many of us are focusing even more so on anti-racism. We're trying to, and whether we're all doing it well or doing it in the right way, I'm hoping that more people's eyes are being open to issues that they may not have considered previously. But just inequities, social and racial injustices, I feel like they've been underscored even more. This year is jam-packed with racial injustices, with the COVID. It's an election year. I mean, it's like, we all know 2020 may be the year that all of us could say, yes, bye-bye, hit me on the door, you know, let the door hit me on the way out. But I feel like this is the time when people need to educate themselves in more ways than they ever have. And I know United Way is doing this Uncomfortable Conversation series. So, you know, kudos, Matt, to you and the young leaders who said, you know what, we want to have some conversations around this. We don't know how to be allies, but we want to learn. We want to invite experts to the table. We want to have people who know about neighborhoods and gentrification and urban renewal and the history of racism in Knoxville. There's a 42% poverty rate in the African American community. Why is that? So I think now is a great time when people are actually, oh wow, that's an issue, or that should be something we should be concerned about. Now, does it mean that everyone's doing it perfectly, or the how? You know, are they? Is everyone have the same approach, or maybe not? But just the fact that it's now, that's also a part of what is being considered and talked about as you look at nonprofits, I think is a big step. And I think people just need to continue on that journey, and young people need to just keep asking those questions and pushing. Us older folks, I guess, you know, Matt, you shared your age, and I feel like a grandma sometimes, and I'm 43, you know, so I think it's now more than ever is when people need to be paying attention to those issues.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Matt, we are going to start with you for this last question. What is one action that you would tell our youth to take to get involved in community activism today?
You know, so many good points have been hit on, you know, and just to kind of follow up on the diversity, equity, and inclusion discussion, you know, this is an issue that shouldn't be an issue. This has to be part of our DNA as a community. We have to consider this at every level, because the reality is we haven't. And when you look at that poverty rate and you look at the history of urban renewal in Knoxville, there's a real problematic history that we have to acknowledge and accept, but we can only do that through learning. So the first step, I think, is for our young people to really understand the history and what we're talking about here, because we have had too many fits and starts around not just diversity, equity, inclusion, but things like homelessness and things like affordable childcare, affordable healthcare. These issues are issues that rise to the top temporarily and then they cool off, and that is not really this successful avenue. And the way we can prevent that is to fully educate ourselves and allow that to be part of our everyday lives. And the last thing I would say is, we're all feeling it, right? 2020 is yeah, it's one of those years. But I will say this, and I hear it in Tanika's voice. I hear it in Eliza, and there's so many out there that are serving that. I feel the reality is 2020 is the opportunity. This is the year that for those of us that are servant minded, and if you're on this, if you're watching this, and if you're watching this at this point, you are servant minded. This is the year, right? This is when your community needs you most. This is when your neighbors need you most. And I would dare say that most people rise to the occasion, or at least the people on this rise to the occasion when the need is the greatest. Well, welcome to 2020, right? This is our opportunity to make change, but not in what we do in a regular year. This is the type of year that can be game changer, where we really come out the other side of this and our world looks different. And so what I would say is, when the chaos is at its highest level, I think the opportunity is also at its highest level. And I don't mean opportunity in a bad or evil way. I mean in a really good way, that to say, we have got the world's attention. The issues of today are right out there for everybody to see. Now let's capitalize that, and let's truly, truly invest our time, invest our energy, invest that passion, our heart, into making that change permanent.
Thank you for that. Tanika, if you could please go next, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So to our youth, I'd say if you are a Black male youth, a Black female youth, a Latinx youth, an Asian American youth, show up every day in your full self, unapologetic. Do not be ashamed of who you are or where you come from. Social media is a huge part of the youth platform. So I say use that to see what organizations in your city is fighting for that same thing you're passionate about. If it's LGBTQ, get connected to that. If it's social injustice, get connected. Use social media to see what organizations in your in your community that you can get connected to as a youth. And honestly, youth, you may be wanting to get involved in something, even if you are a white teenager, a white youth, right? You may be wanting to get involved in something that your parents may or may not think you should be getting involved in. But I would just say, don't go against your parents, but stay connected as much as you can through social media to those organizations. When you become of age, do the right thing. There is a right or a wrong. There is a right or a wrong thing, right? I do not stand on the side of this gray area when it comes to certain issues. So I say, when you get of age, do the right thing, stay connected.
Thank you so much for that. Eliza?
Well, Tanika and Matt really hit on a lot of the things that YWCA and I personally stand behind. So my daughters are mixed race. I am Asian American. My parents are Filipino, and my husband is of German descent. So he's 9 feet tall practically. I'm 5 foot. So my kids get a lot of they get a lot of looks. He's not that tall, but he's tall, and so they, even at 3 and 8 years old, they hear things, they see things, and it makes it tough. We're in a very conservative neighborhood, but we still, building on what Matt said about check in with your neighbors, we make it a point. I still make it my point to get in front of them. And if there's any tiny little thing that we can say or demonstrate that also projects our values, we do that. And so I say that just to communicate that while the pandemic have some people isolate even more. This is like a great excuse to, well, I don't have to leave the house. I don't have to get in front of people. I don't like to argue my beliefs or values in front of others. Now is the time to do it, because like Tanika mentioned, on social media, that is a place where you can go. Now, you also have to make sure that you're seeing what's real news, what's fake news, and so forth. And you definitely don't want to add comments that may affect your career or relationships that you value. But it's also a place where you can discover more about yourself, more about organizations who support what you do. And so just be selective, be smart, be selective. No, don't go against your parents, as Tanika said. But when you are able to, sometimes it helps to have a friend or a family member who is also interested in these things with you. Do those things together, so you have someone to have a conversation with. So yeah, I don't have too much extra to add, but I can't emphasize even more. COVID has taught us that this is our moment, and this is our moment. And Matt, I think I might be stealing from you. It should be a movement, so that it doesn't remain just the moment to do this. Yeah, but thanks for paying attention for this long.
I mean, how can you not? This is like crazy informative. So thank you guys. That's all for this session. Thank you so much for your willingness to answer these questions. We look forward to seeing where your organization will take you in the future. And we appreciate your time for being here with us for Endeavor Summit 2020. So thank you all so, so much.